Oi lads, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be going over some of the recent patch notes and changes released by Ubisoft for Rainbow Six Siege during the Operation Parabellum mid-season patch, mid-season reinforcements. I don't know why they got rid of them if they're essentially doing the same thing here. Anyway, what we've gotten is some operator and gadget balance changes and tweaks Ubisoft feels are necessary. Along with the patch notes, the devs wrote a quick little explanation as to what they make these changes based off, and they said that they make them off of player feedback and data, some of which they've provided for us, the reader, in the form of win delta charts. We're going to be getting into the changes to the attackers first, so I'm going to put that chart on the screen for you now. When I look at this win delta chart for the attackers, there are two things that catch my eye almost immediately. First of which being the position of Ashe, who is overpicked with a pick rate of almost 70%. Now that is crazy high when you think that there are 20 different operators for attackers to choose from and 5 are selected each round. Ashe is also considered to be too strong, which, I mean, if she's picked that much, it goes to show that she probably is a bit strong, but there actually isn't anything being done about her quite yet, not in these patch notes anyway. The second thing that catches my eye from this chart is the position of Finka, who has a quite literal off-the-charts win rate. However, she's criminally underpicked at under 10%. Now, Finka, I know, is used more in the lower levels, and her boost helps a lot there because people don't really know how to control their aim. At the higher level, she's not used quite as much because a lot of people are very used to their recoil patterns on their guns, and using that boost and suddenly going from recoil that you're able to control easily because you know it to no recoil can be quite the change, and it can throw you off. I myself get thrown off by it quite a bit if I see Finka used. So that may account for the lower pick rate on Finka there. However, speaking of Finka, there is some good news as she's the first operator whose changes we're going to be looking into today. Let's go see what Ubisoft has in store for her. Finka is the operator in this next patch that's going to experience the most changes out of anybody. Ubisoft had the difficult task of making Finka both less viable to get down that off-the-charts win rate we saw earlier, but also to get her picked more. Something that you wouldn't think really goes hand in hand, but they've done their best really here to make that happen. So the changes to Finka are as follows. Finka's ability, her nanobots, they're going to be active for a shorter amount of time. You used to be able to have a minute of nanobot activity, I guess, in a round. You get 20 seconds per usage, and you get 3 usages per round. That is going down to 10 seconds per stim. So you are effectively having your time up of the nanobots. Second change coming to Finka is that her stun grenades are going to be replaced by frag grenades. This is part of the trying to get her pick rate up because frag grenades are one of the best attacking gadgets, and giving them to Finka, they'll give people more of an incentive to play Finka because so many people love those frag grenades because you can get the cheeky kills with them and all that other cool stuff. I'm okay with that change, I guess. Third change is Smoke's gas canister damage buff against people who are Finka buffed is being reduced. This weakens the counter that Smoke has against Finka. It's still there, don't get me wrong, however it is less so. It used to be 2.0 damage multiplier, I believe, when you were Finka buffed. Now I believe it's only a 1.5, which is still a lot of damage to be taken from Smokes, so I don't think you're going to be charging through Smokes while Finka buffed anytime soon, but that is going to help make Finka more effective and possibly get her picked more. And the fourth and final change to Finka is that while you are Finka boosted, the ADS modifier that used to be 50% less time to aim down the sights of your weapon is now being reduced to only 25% less time to ADS. This is part of that nerfing Finka so that she's not quite as effective. Not being able to ADS as quickly is going to hurt Finka, obviously, and it's going to hurt everyone who's boosted by Finka because being able to ADS really quickly is obviously a huge advantage in a gunfight in Siege, which typically lasts only a few seconds. For the most part, I'm okay with these changes. I see what Ubisoft's going for. With the win rate on Finka, which amazes me still how it's so high, I'm hesitant to give her any buffs. Like, I don't know how I feel about the frag grenades, especially because they're getting removed from another character, as we'll see later. But without keeping that in mind, like Finka changes alone, I'd say I'm okay with them. I don't know if they really needed to be done. I think Finka was in an okay spot. I kind of like not having her around all that much. I kind of hope she stays in the pick rate that she is. I don't really like Finka or Globals all that much, but that's just me personally. I know Ubisoft wants every operator to be, well, obviously balanced, so I can see why they're making these changes. Moving on to what's probably the most controversial changes in this patch, we have the changes that are coming to IQ. One of my own personal favorite operators, IQ. I really love to play IQ. I am an Ashe main, but IQ is easily my second choice. I really love playing IQ. She's a great operator. But IQ is getting nerfed in this patch. She's being nerfed because her frag grenades, like I said when I was talking about Finka, are being removed and given to Finka instead. IQ is replacing the frag grenades with a claymore. This obviously reduces a lot of the utility that IQ had. Frag grenades are pretty much objectively better than the claymore. But Ubisoft has written up that they think IQ is far too good in her terms of fragging power as a 3-speed and with a good rifle. And mainly this is based on Pro League, where IQ is seen in almost every round. But she does have another change, which is that her electronics detection radius is reduced from 20 meters to 15 meters. Once again, this is another change that's kind of for Pro League. In matchmaking, I don't think IQ is used so much for her range on her electronics detector, more so because like I said earlier, she's a very good fragger. She has 3-speed with a good rifle and frag grenades. She's very good at killing, and she also brings some utility to the table, and that helps. But it's not necessarily the main thing or reason why she's played in matchmaking necessarily. Honestly, I don't really like these changes. I know Ubisoft is making them mainly for Pro League, like I said, where IQ's picked almost every round. I think a lot of the reason for why she is picked every round comes down to the fact that professional teams communicate like it's their job, mostly because it literally is their job. When I play ranked multiplayer, my team rarely communicates, if ever, let alone enough to really get use out of IQ. So I mainly run her as just a fragger and to get myself some intel and maybe share it with my friends who I queue with. But I don't know, I feel like this is a bad change just because since the release of this game, IQ's kind of been, in a way for a while, she was a meme as she was just kind of the Tachanka of attack where she really didn't have a good use and there were just so many better choices. But now that she's finally coming into her own with all these gadgets and defenders that have been introduced that she's a counter to, she's finally coming into her own and she's able to make a spot for herself in the attacking roster as a fairly high pick rate. And right when she gets into that spot, Ubisoft are nerfing her, and I'll be honest, I don't agree with these changes, but that's neither here nor there, as because whether I like it or not, they're being implemented into the game in this next patch. But like I said, I don't really agree with this one. The last operator with big changes coming in this next patch is Blackbeard, or Nerfbeard as some of you may know him, who is in some ways being nerfed and in some ways being buffed. His MK17 is having its damage increased from 42 to 49. That's his assault rifle, or the SCAR. His SR25, or the DMR, is having its damage reduced from 72 to 61. I can understand why they're doing this change, as for a while now, the go-to gun pick for Blackbeard has been the SR25 or the DMR, simply because it does a whole lot more damage, and it's just all around been kind of a better weapon. And I think Ubisoft's just trying to give everyone a choice, or make that choice harder more so, between the SCAR and the DMR. The shield is being nerfed once again in these patch notes, as the hit points of the shield are being reduced from 60 to 50. So it's not a huge nerf, but I mean, you all know Siege. One bullet can be the difference between life or death, 1 damage. So losing 10 from the shield, obviously not something Blackbeard mains want to hear. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel for all of you Blackbeard mains, as there is a 30% reduction in the movement speed penalty when the rifle shield is equipped, meaning that, in layman's terms, while Blackbeard has his rifle shield on, everyone knows he moves like a turtle. Well, he's going to move a bit faster now. Not necessarily normal speed, but he'll be a bit faster. These Blackbeard changes I'm okay with. I think It's hard to say right now for me whether it's a buff or a nerf. Honestly, I think it might be a little bit of a buff just because movement speed is so important in this game and it helps so much, and he's getting a fairly decent movement speed buff, but I don't know how the weapon balance changes will work out, and I'm not sure how the shield balance changes will work out. I feel like that won't have too much of an effect. I think overall this actually might be a good patch for Blackbeard, although only time will tell, really. Okay, so finishing off our changes to the attackers, we have some quickfire changes to Glaz, Twitch, Jackal, and Dokebi. Starting off with Glaz, his rifle damage has been reduced from 85 to 71. I think this is a much needed change, as Glaz has been, as many of you probably know, very powerful and a strong pick on just about any point on any map. Twitch also has had her gun damage reduced. The FAMAS damage has been dropped from 40 to 37. Ubisoft says this is to combat a very high pick rate that she has in ranked, similar to Ashe. Ubisoft says they don't want to go too far nerfing Twitch, as they want to keep her fun to play, and they want to look at smaller other ways to get people to maybe try new operators. Jackal has had his footstep scanning distance increased from 5 meters to 8 meters. This is not a huge change at all. It's a buff, but it's not much of a buff. It basically just means that when you're scanning for footprints as Jackal, you can do it from a bit farther off, and you're going to be a bit safer while doing it. But like I said, not a real big change at all. And finally, we have Dokebi, whose Claymore has been replaced with stun grenades. Dokebi's Claymore, let's be honest, most people run smokes on her, so this is kind of a nothing change. Ubisoft, by their wording, seems to be looking at this as a nerf. I could see it being a buff. Like I said, not much of a change though, as I feel like most people will run smokes. But that might change, seeing as Glaz has been nerfed here. But for right now, I'm going to assume that most people will continue to run smoke grenades. Anyway, that rounds things up for the attackers. Let's get into the defender win delta chart and see what changes are coming on the defense side of things in this patch. When we look at the win delta chart for the defenders, we can see that there's a lot of operators in a lot of different places. Main things to note for me personally are that we have 4 operators towards the top who probably have a win rate that's a bit too high and might need some looking into sooner rather than later, but none of them are actually getting touched in this update. And then the other thing to note is the 4 operators towards the bottom who are both underpicked and far too weak and definitely could use some help in the terms of a buff. However, other than those 2 outlying groups, you can see that most of the defenders are fairly well balanced to a degree. Maybe Mute being another underlier, but he's still pretty close to balanced. I'd say everyone else is pretty well balanced other than maybe a few overpicks, but that's something that's not in immediate need of fixing. So everything's looking pretty good, and our only defensive change for this patch is going to be Frost. Frost is having her weapons buffed across the board in this patch, as we see her SMG damage going up from 43 to 45, which I think will really help her, as this is the main gun that any Frost will use. Because of her fire rate being so low, I think it's important that she has a fairly high damage number. And her other weapon, the Super 90 shotgun, is also being buffed from 32 damage all the way up to 35 damage. Ubisoft does say that this will not be like the Super 90 that we saw in Black Ice though, so no need to worry about that. Quick side note, there is another defensive buff, not for an operator but rather for a gadget. Barbed wire is going to have the slowing effect increased from 45% to 50%, so a slight buff to a gadget that I already thought was one of the best choices on the defensive roster. Hopefully this will get more people to bring barbed wire, because you can really never have enough as a defensive team. Before I leave you guys, I'll just add on some closing notes that Ubisoft had. These aren't really changes, but just something that Ubisoft wanted the community to be aware of. Regarding the 2 new operators, Ubisoft says that Alibi seems to be a bit strong in ranked play, but that she isn't used much in Pro League, so they're going to wait a bit on data to see what happened and what their next steps are going to be regarding her. As for Maestro, Ubisoft says that they're very happy with him. I would say I am too. I think he's pretty good. Only thing, maybe slight nerf to the LMG. It seems pretty good right now, but it's fine for now. Also, Ash, Twitch, Jaeger, and Bandit all have very high pick rates, and all are being looked into to make maybe some slight nerfs that'll get them down to around what Ubisoft wants them to be picked at. And then finally, one last note is that Castle has some major changes, quote Ubisoft, in the works, but they are very long term right now and not really all that close to being done. They just want everyone to know that he is being looked at to make him more viable. Anyways, guys, that's all for me. These are the Rainbow Six mid-season patch notes for Year 3, Season 2. Anyways, I'm out.